Hi, I'm Jason, and this is going to be the fourth SolidWorks API tutorial. In this tutorial, we are going to write a macro that creates a cylinder by a specified length and diameter, and in the course of writing this macro, we'll get an introduction into the SketchManager and FeatureManager and write our first subroutine. With that being said, let's go. Okay, let's use the macro recorder to help us write the beginning of our code. So I'm going to click record. Open up a new part, and let's open up a sketch on the front plane. And now I'm going to stop, and the reason why is because we want to force ourselves to use the SketchManager and FeatureManager through the SolidWorks API. That means we're going to have to look it up in the macro rather than just drawing it out. So I'm going to stop right here, save the macro, and then open it up to look at the code. Alright, so this is the code that we have for opening up a new part and creating a sketch on the front plane. Let's clean up this code a little bit. So I'll clean up the first line, and then let's early bind our SW app object to the top level of the SolidWorks library. And let's early bind our part to be a model doc2 object. Okay. Now, to create a cylinder by a specified diameter of length, we need to do the following things. So we need to open up a part document, open a sketch, create variables for the length and diameter of the cylinder, draw a circle, and extrude the cylinder. So the macro that we've done so far already opens up a part document and opens up a sketch. So we can say that these are done. Now the next thing we need to do is create variables for the length and diameter of our cylinder. So let's do that. Let's clean up this code a little bit more. I'll indent all this. And in the next section of code, we will be creating our diameter and length variables. So I know from ahead of time that these variables need to be doubles. So I'll create two doubles, dim cylinder length as double, and dim cylinder diameter as double. Now for this macro, let's make our length of our cylinder 12 inches and the diameter of our cylinder 2 inches. So cylinder length equals 12 inches and cylinder diameter equals 2. And units in inches. Okay. So that was easy. So let's strike this off our list. The next thing we need to do is draw a circle. In order for us to draw a circle on a sketch, we're going to need to create an instance of the class SketchManager. And if we looked at the SolidWorks library as a visual diagram, it would look something like this. The topmost object or class is the SolidWorks class. Below that would be the model doc2 class, which again is that's like your open part document. That's what a model doc2 is. And within the model doc2 there is another class which is the SketchManager. Now the SketchManager class will allow us to insert and close sketches and create sketch segments such as lines, arcs, circles, etc. And if you were to try to visualize what the SketchManager class is, it's very similar to your sketch toolbar that you have when you open up SolidWorks. So you can think of your SketchManager as basically this toolbar that's circled in red. Now one note about the SketchManager class, it doesn't have any dimensioning. That means that anytime you use the SketchManager by itself to draw something, the sketch will be underdefined. Okay, so let's create an instance of our SketchManager class. So let's create a new section of code. We'll call this creating the sketch manager. Now, as I mentioned before, the sketch manager is is within the model doc interface. So if I go to help, API help, and search for model doc 2, and I search for members, we will see that the sketch manager is a property of the model doc 2. So let's click on the sketch manager and see how to create it. So to create a sketch manager, what we will need is an instance of model doc 2, which we have. That's our part in our code. And then we'll need to declare a value as sketch manager, and then set that value equal to our model doc 2 instance dot sketch manager. So let's do that. We go back to our code. We already have our part instance declared and taken care of. That's our model doc. So what we need to do is now declare our sketch manager, and we'll call it dim SW for SolidWorks sketch manager, and that needs to be declared as a sketch manager. Now we'll need to set the sketch manager equal to the instance of model doc, which is part. So set SolidWorks sketch manager equal to part dot sketch manager. And that's it. We've now created our sketch manager, and this will allow us to have access to methods that allow us to create lines, splines, and circles, which we'll use in this case. So the next part of our code will be drawing a circle. So let's look at the sketch manager interface to figure out how we're just going to create a circle. So back to our SolidWorks library, and let's see, if I search sketch manager, or sketch manager, it'll take me to the sketch manager interface. And if I look into members, I should find a method that will allow us to create a circle. And here it is, create a circle. So I click here to figure out what we need to do to create a circle using this method. So we're going to need an instance of sketch manager, which we've already created. We are now going to need to declare a value as a sketch segment. So that's the object that's going to be our circle. And then we'll need to fill in some parameters to create this circle. And those are a series of doubles. So let's start working on this. So let's declare a sketch segment as our circle. So dim the circle as sketch segment. And the circle is going to be the object, which is going to be the circle that we draw on our sketch. And we need to set this circle equal to the sketch manager dot create circle method. And now we're going to need to input a couple of parameters. Now these parameters are described down here. So we're going to need 6 doubles. 3 of those doubles are going to be the center location of the circle, and then the last 3 doubles are going to be a point on the circle. Now, if you remember, we are describing our circle by a diameter, not by a point on the circle. So what we need to do is change our diameter, which is going to be the whole length. We need to actually relate the whole diameter to a point on the circle. And we're going to do this by basically taking the diameter and dividing it by 2. So the point on our circle is going to be from the origin straight up, it's going to be 0. Diameter divided by 2, 0. This is going to be the point on our circle. And the center of our circle is just going to be the center of our sketch, which was 0, 0, 0. So let's write this. So the center of our circle is going to be 0, 0, 0. And the point on our circle is going to be directly above, so 0 for the x-coordinate, and then cylinder diameter divided by 2, and our z-coordinate is just going to be 0. Alright, things are looking okay, but it seems like I made a typo somewhere. Maybe not. Okay. So if all this is correct, if I run this macro, we should have a circle created that has a diameter of, let me capitalize that B, a diameter of 2 inches. So let's run this. And I have not typed this in correctly. So must have made a typo somewhere. Cylinder diameter. Okay, let's try to run that again. There we go. Got it. So I didn't type it in correctly. Here's our circle, centered around our center of our sketch, which is 0, 0, 0. Our point is directly above. Now if I measure this, this should have a diameter of 2 inches. And it doesn't. It has a diameter much larger than 2 inches. So what the heck is going on with this? So why didn't this function create a circle that has a diameter of 2 inches? Well, if we look at the interface for this, you'll see that the units for this method need to be in meters. And in fact, SolidWorks API only works in meters. So any unit that we want to work with, whether it's inches, we're going to need to create a subroutine to convert our units into meters. So let's do that. So let's get out of submain and create a function that's going to return an input unit into meters. So we'll say private function convert to meters. We're going to need an input, so we'll call this inches as double. And now we're going to return inches as meters. So convert inches to meters. So convert to meters function needs to equal inches divided by 39.3701. That should do it. Now we're going to need to take our diameter and convert it into meters. And while we're at it, might as well convert our length into meters as well, because all SolidWorks methods and functions work in meters. So convert units to meters. Cylinder length equals convert to meters dot convert to meters cylinder length. So again, what we're doing is just feeding in the variable cylinder length into convert to meters, and then we're just going to return a value that's the meters equivalent of the inches input. So we'll do the same thing again for the diameter. So cylinder diameter equals convert to meters cylinder diameter. Now, if everything's done correctly, this should create a circle that is 2 inches in diameter. So let's run this. If I measure this circle, there we go, 2 inches in diameter. So this function works and it converts inches into meters. Now that we have our circle drawn, we'll need to go on to the next part of this macro, which is going to be extruding it into a cylinder. And that means we're going to need to create a new instance of a class, and that's going to be for working with features. So like how we had a SketchManager class, we have a FeatureManager class, which is also within the model.doc2, which remember is part. So there should be a property of model.doc2, which is the FeatureManager. And that FeatureManager is going to give us methods that will allow us to make extrusions, cuts, mirrors, and basically this FeatureManager class that we're going to create, or that we're going to create an instance of, is basically our feature toolbar that you normally work with when you're in SolidWorks. So we're going to create an instance of FeatureManager, which is basically this bar that you see circled in red. So let's do that. Go back to our code, and we're going to create another section, which is going to be for extruding the circle. Extruding the circle. So first thing we need to do is create the feature manager. We should say create a feature manager instance. Okay, so let's go to back to our SolidWorks library, and let's go back to model.doc2. If I look under members, I should find feature manager. So yeah, there it is. Again, it's a property of model.doc2. If I click here, it should tell me how to create an instance of this. So again, what we need to have is an instance of model.doc2, which we have, and then just declare a value as feature manager. Let's do that. So dim SolidWorks feature manager as a feature manager. And now we gotta set this SW feature manager equal to our model.doc2's feature manager. And remember, model.doc2 is our part. So SolidWorks feature manager equals, I need to set this. Set SolidWorks feature manager equal to part.feature manager. That's it. With the instance of the feature manager created, the next thing we're going to need to do is use it to extrude the circle into a cylinder. So that's going to be our next part of our code. I'm going to say extrude circle into cylinder. So let's look through the feature manager interface to figure out what method we're going to use to extrude. So if I go back to the API help, and I click on feature manager, I go into its interface, and if I look for something that we can use to extrude, there we go. Here's a method, feature extrusion 2. This is what we want to use. And if you look at the description of feature extrusion 2, you'll see that it has a lot of parameters. These parameters are all described down at the bottom. I'm just going to go through the first 3 really quickly. So to do this, to use it, what we're going to need to do is create a value feature. And then this feature is going to be the equivalent, it's going to be the instance of our cylinder. So I'll say dim cylinder as feature. And let's set the cylinder equal to SolidWorks feature manager dot, and this is the feature extrusion 2. And let's just go through the first 3 parameters really quickly. So I'll just put those in as true. You can read the description and see what these parameters do yourself. But I just want to get to the 4th one and show you how to use the 4th parameter. So if you look at the 4th parameter, it's going to say termination type for first end as defined in this link. Now, if you click on this link, it's going to give you a couple of options of what you can use as your parameter. You can either set your input to one of these integer values, so 0, 6, 5, etc., or you can type in this command, and it's basically the equivalent to the integer that's shown to the right. We want our cylinder to be just a blind extrusion, so I'm just going to type in SolidWorks and condition blind. So anytime you see a input parameter that has a link to it, it's going to show you what type of inputs you can have. They can either be in kind of like, you can imagine this as a enumeration input or an integer input. Either one works fine. So I'm going to input the rest of these parameters and we'll get right back to the code. With the rest of the input parameters fed into the feature extrusion 2, we can now run this macro. And quick note, we will be using the cylinder length that we defined up here as the input parameter for the feature extrusion depth. So let's run this macro and ensure that it works correctly. And it created a cylinder that has a diameter of 2 inches and a length of 12 inches. So it works correctly. What we did in this tutorial was create an instance of the SketchManager and an instance of the FeatureManager. In the case of the SketchManager, we learned that it can be used to open and close sketches and create sketch segments, which in this case a circle, but it can be used to create other sketch segments such as lines, splines, etc. With the FeatureManager, we learned it can be used to extrude a sketch, but it can also be used to generate all sorts of features that you normally find in your feature tree, such as cuts, extrusions, and holes that you would generate using the hole wizard. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did we go through all this trouble of writing out this code? After all, the task that we just performed is so simple, it could be easily replicated using the SolidWorks macro recorder. And you'd be totally right. This is a very simple macro. But what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to the point where we could create macros that fulfill complex tasks. In which case, the macro recorder is no longer be sufficient to create those macros. What we're going to need to do instead is develop skills so we can navigate through the SolidWorks API library. SolidWorks API library is just simply too long to memorize. We need to know how to look through it and find the objects and methods that are going to be relevant to the task we're trying to perform. This theme of trying to develop our skills of looking through the library is going to be repeated in many more tutorials to come. As always, if you have any suggestions on what SolidWorks API topics you'd like me to cover, simply just put it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.